Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to this webinar. This is Ruth Bradstreet here with Above the Tree Line. And what we're going to be talking about today is weeding. We have made some changes recently and just rolled out some updates and some nice new things to the weeding part of Edelweiss Analytics. So I wanted to show you how that worked and explain a bit more about it. It should be fairly short. I think it'll probably be a half-an-hour webinar. Also, it will be recorded, so you'll be able to get access to a link if you want to share it with your colleagues. Okay, so let's get started. So I made this nice picture of spring because the marketing stuff that Sarah sent out was really all about spring cleaning and weeding and things like that. So I thought, oh, that'd be prettier than our usual template. So I made a new PowerPoint. And really the weeding, it's all about tools. So, I mean, I'm sure all of you have done plenty of weeding in your time and done it in various ways. In Edelweiss Analytics, we've had the feature in there for a while, and it's we thought quite clever in that it uses different parameters as you know, in addition to old worn titles. It includes outdated and low circs and high circs and so on. So we kind of improved on those a little bit, but to make it a bit easier, you know, for honing down more to the titles or the items that you really need to get rid of, and making it faster and quicker for you to share information with other people in the library. So if one person wants to sort of control some of the parameters around weeding, you can do that, but you can let other people play around with that too. And it's very easy and flexible for, you know, to change the kind of results that you're going to get. So first, what I'm going to do in this webinar actually is to run through what we changed and what's new in this PowerPoint, and then I'll give you a demo of how to actually use it. So the big change really is that we introduced the concept of a weeding profile, and what that means is that you can create a set of parameters for weeding, the age, circulation, and so on, within certain tolerances, and save that as a profile. And then you can apply that profile of parameters to any group of titles you want using the saved filters, which is a way to filter down the title set you're looking at. So you can also save as many profiles as you want. You can create new profiles. And the other cool thing is that you can share profiles with your colleagues. So if you make a profile that you think would be appropriate for outdated technical books, for example, you can give that profile a name. You can choose to share it with your colleagues if you think it would be useful for them, or if you're instructing somebody at one of the branches or your branch to do some weeding using your profile. Or you can choose to not share it at all and just keep it to yourself. And also you can tweak those profiles very easily. So you can create a profile, run it, and if you decide that for a particular category, the profile doesn't really quite match, is not giving you enough results or too many results, you can just change one of the parameters or multiple parameters at the time, run it again really quickly, and get different results. You don't need to save those results, or you don't need to save the changes to your weeding profile. And if you're using somebody else's profile, you won't really be able to change them anyway, but you can still get different results with a temporary change. Another feature of it is what I'm calling, anyway, dynamic results. We've made quite a few changes to just the way that weeding results are generated, and they will come up a lot faster. We also removed the restriction where you had to sort of pick a single classification type, like either your collection code or BISAC or Dewey, and the recommendations were kind of based around those groupings, which could sometimes lead to a little bit of confusion. And the flexibility to change the number of results. So because it's so easy to change the settings, you can sort of hone down to, so if you're looking at a particular subset of the collection, you think we really need to reduce this by 10%, say. And 10% would be about, you know, 100 items, 100 books. You can really easily get down to 100 books or around about that, and then generate that list and send someone off to go and find those 100 books. And also filter for anything is what I put here. And that again is to do with the saved filters. So around not the parameters of what, you know, what meets the criteria for weeding, but more what meets the criteria for the collection. So it could be anything as broad as all of nonfiction, but for weeding, presumably you want to sort of narrow down to a particular area of the library. So you might take just a subset of young adult and make a filter for that. And that could be a filter based on your collection code. It could be based on format. It could be based on BISAC. It could be based on any combination of those things, in fact. And then you can combine that with the new profile. Another new thing that we think is pretty cool is the concept of multiple copies when you're weeding, using that as a parameter. So in other words, if you had more than, you can set it to say more than 3 copies of something. You can get results for only books where you have at least 3 items on the shelf of that particular book. So that's a really nice way to be able to kind of go for the low-hanging fruit. If something is really, there are just too many multiples, but you're not ready to get rid of all of them, you can very easily generate a list like that. Send somebody else off and ask them not to pull the last one. And then you can also run a separate report later that's for the things that are actually only have one. And then maybe take a different approach when you go out to the stacks as to how you would treat those, or because in those cases you're going to have a decision about whether you want to get rid of it permanently, whether you want to replace it, and so on. And then the last thing here is, well, not the last thing actually, but the last kind of feature piece on the lane is this distribution of the rationale. So if you remember in the current version, it will show you a rationale in each item. It will say this came up on your list because it's poorly circulating according to what your rules are for poorly circulating. Or this came up on your list because it's potentially worn because it has circed over X number of times. And this one came up on the list because it's outdated, because the pub date is more than 10 years or whatever you set, or because it's been longer in your library system for longer than a certain number of years as well. So you could see those before, but the update here is that if you want to break them out into 3 different things, you can click on the individual bars, I should say, in the bar chart, and just drill down to those titles. Or you can click on the 230 items total as it shows here. The reason that it's a bar chart and not like a pie chart as we usually do is because there's going to be overlap. So there are going to be some things that are potentially worn and outdated, or there's some things that are going to be outdated and poorly circulating. So these numbers may not add to up to 230 because there could be something that was in outdated as well as in poorly circulating. That makes sense. And the final thing is printing from weeding. If you've used it before, you'll know that the weeding functions require you to put things on an action plan. So you make these action plans, you can add things to them for buying, you can add things to them for weeding, and then just keep adding things on at later times. And then you can go into print mode and print those out with a barcode. Now, the change we made was to sort of skip that step. Not that you have to, you can still do exactly that. But if you want to, you can just look at your weeding results and say, okay, that looks good. I want to print that, or print some of these titles or some of these items, and go directly to a format very like that old format, but a bit better. So it includes the barcode, but it now also includes last circ date and year-to-date circ. And everything that you can actually see on the screen. I think in prior versions it didn't have a couple of those elements. The only thing to note about this, if you're excited about this idea, is that it's not quite ready yet. We thought it would be, because of the webinar, I thought it was going to be ready, but we didn't want to move the webinar. So, but it should be out probably within a week or so, and you'll see that directly from the weeding page. And it will just be like any other export where you can say, let's export these, go to the PDF option for the kind of action plan. I forget what we call it now, but the action plan layout, print view. Oops. Here we go. So this is an image of what it looks like. So you got ISBN, item ID, when it was created, title, author, of course, pub date, branch, call number, collection code, last checked out, year-to-date circ, lifetime circ, barcode, and then the rationale or rationales if there's more than one. That's not the end. No, that is the end. So, okay, I'm going to switch now to showing you what it actually looks like. So this is, you should be seeing my screen in my browser now, and you will see something similar to this. What I've done, if you're familiar with the lanes, is, the weeding analysis is a new weeding lane. The old weeding lane is still there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in my case, I've put the weeding analysis lane to the very top of my page, just for the purposes of demoing. But when you first go in here, chances are it'll be the very end of your page, and you should also get a little notification at the top of your homepage telling you that it exists as well, just to let you know. So you can see here the chart that was generated already, and this is the area where I've got these profiles, and then this describes the profile right here. So you can see right now I'm set to, this demo profile is set to purely circulating, means at least 35 months with no checkouts. Worn means at least 25 checkouts, and outdated means at least 25 years since publication or 15 years in the ILS. And then the multiple copy thing I was talking about is here. So right now it's set to 1, but you could set that to anything. And also the really key thing underneath that is showing the filter that I have set, which is going to match the filter up on the right-hand side here. So this is the saved filter that you've got applied. You can change it here. You can also change it here. I'll talk more about those filters in case you're not familiar with how to use those. But I'm going to start by showing you this part. Also, you've got remember, if you've got multiple locations, that this location control is up here. So this is also a factor. You want to make sure you're looking at the location you're looking to weed, or all locations, but most likely you're going to pick one. So what you would do here is you can click on this one to see all of my profiles. So this is a nice, if you're familiar with the saved filters for the bibliographic data, this is a very similar look and feel, where you've got filters that or weeding profiles, I should say, that you've recently used. You've got a list of all your own profiles. These are all ones I've created. And then I've got 8 that were shared with me, which means that other people in my library system made a profile and shared it with everybody else. So in these cases, I can't edit them, but I can use them or copy them even. So that would let me select something new. If I want to create a new one, I can click on plus right here, create new weeding profile. Just give it a name. And then this is where you can say, I would like to share it with my colleagues or not. So I'll say, okay, sure, they can see my demo. And what it's going to do is just by default use the exact same settings I already had. So it's going to look like it's going to have 35 months and 25 checkouts and so on. But if that's not what you intended, of course, you can edit that. I'm sorry, don't edit that. You can click on it. You can click on the individual pieces, I should say, and then edit those. So you can say purely circulating. Actually, I'm going to say for this, it's going to be a bit less than that, only 24 months circulated, and then save it. And then for this one, I can make this something else. The other thing here too is to note you can ignore from analysis completely. So if I say I actually don't care about worn, actually in a lot of cases you might want to do a worn analysis, looking for the things that are not so much old and not circing or outdated, but the things that are circing well and you might want to replace. Often that's a very different way of thinking when you're weeding, so you might want to just ignore those completely and not generate that set. And then, so I've made these changes to this, and because they're in red right now because I've just temporarily changed them. So if I wanted to run this now, I can just hit run and it will generate results. But if I want to permanently make that, well, not permanently necessarily, but if I wanted to make that change on my Demo 2 profile, all I have to do is click save and it will update this and they'll no longer be red. So that's how you get your own profile, essentially. So now what it's showing me here is I've got 260 titles suggested as being poorly circulating. In other words, more than 2 years without checkouts. And about only 27 that are suggested because they were outdated. And of course, nothing is suggested for worn because I excluded that completely. And then also you saw when I ran it, it automatically showed me all the titles underneath. So this is a combination. This is all titles, including worn and outdated. But if I said, let's have a look at just the outdated 27 titles, click on that, and you get those 27 items. Or just the poorly circulating, click on that, and I'll just get those 260. And of course, this is as before, where you can do a lot with, you know, sorting, searching, sort by author, pub date, anything, any of these column headings. So you might want to do something like year-to-date circulation or last checked out if you want to really get to the worst stuff first. And of course, if you want to find anything in particular or just filter down to a particular collection code within that, you can just start typing text essentially, and it will find text anywhere it is below and just show you things that match, which is, I think, really quite cool. Also, of course, you can do things with this. The next step would be to make decision about something and maybe put in an action plan. So you can select multiple items, select some items, go to this other actions, and then say add to action plan. And like I said, within a week or so, there'll be another one here that will be export, and we'll give you that PDF format. But typically, people would add it to an action plan. If you're going to be adding things from other lists. Oops, I accidentally selected everything. I didn't want to do that. Don't mind me. Let me just do this again. Just to make it quick. I'm just going to add those 2 items to an action plan. There we go. So then I've already got the action plans I'll show you where you find those if you're not familiar with them, but you can create obviously as many as you want because there's hundreds of them here. You can create a new plan from here, or you can add to an existing plan. So I've got one that says weeding list. I'm just going to add it to my weeding list. The purpose of it is to retire those items, and then it will add those 2 items to it. And then I can go to that action plan and print out that barcode version. I'll show you that shortly. But just to come back to this control at the top here, so you see I've got this. I can also go in here, click on this to select a different profile. So if I go to the profiles shared with me, for example, I can find this one that's called Grubby. And this one is called Grubby because it's really about the worn title. So you'll see I've excluded the poorly circulating and excluded outdated as parameters at all. And then if I run this one, well, I shouldn't say I have. The person that created this profile and shared it with me set it up this way. So that gives me 677 suggestions for things that are grubby because they've got high circs. The thing you'll notice with this one, though, is I can change things. So I can say, you know what, that's too many items. I want fewer. I want to actually say at least, you know, something like 20 circs. Increase that number. And then I can run this report again and obviously get fewer results. So if you wanted to hone down just to 100, you could keep changing that number until you get roughly 100. Or you could just sort by something and then just take the first X number of them. But in this case, I don't have the save button, so I can't save it because it's somebody else's grubby profile. But obviously, I could easily make one like this because all I have to do is create a new weeding profile. It will be exactly the same as Grubby, except you can give it a name you want, and then you can do whatever you like with it. So the other thing I want to show you, maybe I'll do this with. Yeah, maybe Grubby's good actually, is this, when I talked a bit about this number of copies. So this one is, all these ones I've looked at have been set to 1. Actually, I do have another one. There's one of mine here that is excess copies, that's it. So I have a profile called excess copies that is set to at least 3 copies on the shelf as well as other parameters. So if I run that, it's only going to suggest things where there's at least 3 copies. And so you'll actually see that in here. So if Spirited Away, all 3 of them are being recommended. So what you might want to do is decide that 2 of them get sent back or get dealt with in some way, and one of them stays on the shelf. And you can kind of pick based on the details you have here and possibly take those 2 of them and put them on the action plan and not the 3rd one, and then give that to somebody to to work on. And of course, it could be any number. If you do something like at least 5 on the shelf and get results for that, it could be a very quick way to reduce a part of the collection. The other big thing here is the filter, as I mentioned. So it shows you the filter I've had on all the time that's called biography memoir. So I can actually click on it in either place. If I click on it there, it does the same thing as if I clicked it on the right-hand side. And it takes me to a similar looking thing, but this is actually for saved filters, which is all around what kind of titles you're generating as opposed to what parameters. And this is similar. So I've got filters I've used recently. I've got filters that I saved myself. I've got filters that my colleagues have shared with me. And then we have Edelweiss filters. There's a set called genre filters, and there's 40 something of them that are mostly based on BISAC categories, in some cases based on combinations of them, or even a combination of them and format. For example, mass market is a genre here. So you could pick one of those and say, you know, let's have a look instead at all cookbooks for the same exact excess copies thing right now. And then it reruns it, and then I've got, okay, these are things where I've got multiple copies of some cookbooks that possibly some of them could go. Right, and I could just say, well, let's look at the ones that are potentially worn, sort of the grubby report without actually using the grubby report. And then I've got these ones of a fair bit, and they're multiples. So maybe I want to just get rid of them and get another copy. And the ones that are poorly circulating, maybe I just want to get rid of, well, get rid of the 2014 annual, since it's presumably a bit out of date. But the filters, to go back to that, are super powerful, and they're really useful in everywhere in Edelweiss Analytics and just in Edelweiss in general, because you can create whatever you want. And for you as a library, you can create filters that are quite complex. And when you first go in here, it will give you this little message about learning more, I should say. So you can click on the piece with librarians if this is new to you, and read our help documentation on that. So I can come in here and say this is a saved filter for adult fiction or something like that. And then I can choose from these different attributes of books. So I can say I want adult fiction, a filter for adult fiction that's all front list, for example, things coming out or with very recent pub dates, or everything that is coming out in the next month or the next 6 months. So you can use pub date. You can use subject as kind of the obvious one, and subject in this case means you're using BISAC here, but you've also got the option for Dewey, which we wouldn't recommend for new titles necessarily, but BISAC is the best one to use if you're looking for new titles. And of course, your own information will be in here too. So your collection codes will be listed as well. So you can burrow into your structure of collection codes, pick any combination of them. You can even exclude something. So if you say, I want everything except I don't want children's audio, and I don't want teen, you can really get quite fine-tuned with what you're looking for. And then you can do collection code plus something else. So you could say collection code plus pub date, older than, in this case, maybe if you're looking for something that's generating weeding, older than 5 years ago or something like that. So this is not adult fiction by any stretch of the imagination, but I've just created a filter called adult fiction. And also, then you'd want to come back in and select. So my saved filters are here. Adult fiction is one I just created. I can edit it from here. I can make a copy of it from here. If it was very complicated and I just want to make a tweak, I can copy it and then change something about it. And I can also, when I go into edit it, I can also elect to share it with my colleagues. So in this case, I meant to share it so everybody could see actually this is a real adult fiction one. Everybody could see it and use it as well at the library. So filter is super key. You can just, once you've got your filter set up the way you want, well, you don't have to wait until you do, but as you go along, find filters that match the pieces of the collection that you want to do weeding for. and select the filter, combine it with your profile. And like I said, you can really you can make a lot, you can get some very quick results from weeding this way. Like I mentioned, we changed the technology. So when you run these reports, they tend to be, now this is being regenerated for cooking. If I take this filter off completely, say, you would just go in here and then say clear, clear, clear. Then there's no filter at all, and I'm running this for the whole collection if I run it again, which can't do that. Yeah. So if I pick this other profile, it's going to invoke the weeding. And this is where I say something's really fast, and of course it's not. And I regret it. I was doing this earlier, and it was. But of course, this is probably excessive for what you're doing, because you would never want to run it on the whole collection. So we're getting close to the end. I'm gonna check and see. It looks like someone had a question. I'm just gonna see what that was. Yes, so the question was, there, it's finished now. Okay, good, I don't have to fill any more time. Question was, can you share a profile with colleagues later? Yes, you can. So you can just go back in and edit your profile here. So this one called Woofers. If I hadn't checked the box the first time, or if I decided actually I don't want anybody to see it because that's such a ridiculous name, I can just check or uncheck that box, save it, and that will make it, in this case, disappear from my colleagues. But yeah, so now I've got 3,000 items total, 1,000 odd in each one of these types. So this is a very long list. So this is where I might say, well, actually, I do actually need a filter for this, or I do need to change some of these parameters. So I can go back and say, let's try doing this for large print fiction. So large print fiction, you get a lot of potentially worn books in this, under this parameter. So you might say, well, actually, my criteria for large print fiction is that, you know, since they're mostly hardcovers and stuff, they can last a bit longer. So maybe worn is, you know, really 25 circs before I really care to go and have a look at them and see how they're faring. Whereas a kid's book might be a lot less, since you know how kids are. So yeah, so that reduces it down to potentially worn. It's quite a bit lower. So I think that wraps it up. If there are other questions, feel free to contact us through support tools that we have on the site, or email us at support@abovethetreeline.com. Oh, existing. Well, we just released this, I should say. Sorry, I'm getting some direction here. We just released this the other day, so you should see this at the end of your page. So if you don't see it already, you should see it already if you haven't seen it. The other thing to note, I wanted to show you, actually I almost forgot, was that the workflow lane is still there, so the old weeding is still there. So you can go in there, and if you want to compare apples to apples, which it should be, feel free to do that. It just, you know, if you notice that things don't look the same, or you don't get the same results you're expecting in the new version versus the old, feel free to let us know. That, not that I'm asking you to test for us, but we thought we would leave that up. Also, if you just have things set up in a certain way and you'd rather we don't pull that away from you in the old version, it's there for a while. So we'll kind of monitor that, engage up a good point where we can actually just remove this lane altogether. However, it does still include the action plan. So right now, this is the only access to action plans through this lane. But we will work on changing that fairly soon. So it will be something that you can access just sort of at the top of the page somewhere, rather than within a lane. And then you can open up your action plans list from there. And we're working on reformatting this as well at the same time. So this is where you see your whole list of plans, and then you go in and you see the actual titles in the plan, and you can go into this print view, which is what I was talking about earlier as being available from the list itself without having to go to action plans. And that will be fairly soon, within a week or so. I think I do see one of the questions, so hang on for a moment. Oh, okay. Yeah, somebody had trouble with the video. Well, I'll send you the link to that. All right, well, Thank you very much. And please be in touch if you have any feedback about it or questions and if we can help you in any way. Thanks.